Hey everyone, it's your host Cyber Gaming Studios, and welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day because in this video, we're going to be going over a topic that a lot of people may be aware of, but some that may not understand of what analog drifting is. Now, if you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell's notification icon right below so you can never miss a single video of whenever I upload a video. And if you're a returning subscriber or just a returning viewer, please leave a like on this video if you found this video very informative and or entertaining, whatever your preferences are. Now, in this video, I wanted to make this video simply for the factor is I wanted to enlighten people and inform people on what they thought was analog drifting. For example, parents who out there who are into gaming have no idea what gaming is, and they're pretty much trying to understand what's it about gaming that kids like these days and what does each term mean. Now, analog drifting is something that's very common within controllers. It's not common in certain controllers, but it can happen to any controller that has analog sticks. And this is a very bad problem because I actually recently had a controller that recently just started having analog drifting, and it was the weirdest thing that I've found out that my controller had analog drifting. And I'll explain that later when I explain what analog drifting is. So whenever a parent who has no idea what analog drifting means, and it's very frustrating, and I can understand when you're trying to have your child or teenager explain to you what analog drifting is, and you try to figure out what it is, how can you fix it, etc., etc. And for the kid, it's really hard for them to explain, simply for the fact that it's better for you to feel it for yourself than explain it to you. So this video is going to explain it to you, especially if you're not into gaming and you have a child or a teenager or a son or daughter, etc., etc., who plays video games and is suffering these kind of issues. This can also pertain to people who have analog drifting and need to know whether if their analog controller, such as I have one right here, this one's not suffering from analog drifting, but I will show you in a moment of what analog drifting is. So let's get started. So what is analog drifting? Analog drifting is where some contact pads within the analog controller goes bad. And it's not with the controller itself, but it's with the analog sticks on the built into the controller that is the problem here. This can be fixable if you have knowledge of soldering, but if you don't, then you just have to buy a new controller and say goodbye to the old one. So how does analog drifting work? So if you really take your analog controller and you ever play a game, this is the most thing that you're going to be using in every single game. It doesn't matter whether if it's a scrolling game, if it's a platform game, if it's a first-person shooter or third person, it does not matter. You're always going to use this through the whole entire experience because these are the most common things to happen. Now, what is analog drift, and how can you just tell if you have analog drift on your controller? Now, whenever you play a game, and you'll notice that you may not notice instantaneously, but your character moves either left to right or up or down without you touching your analog sticks. That is called analog drifting. Sometimes analog drifting may occur even while you're moving your analog stick. So you can move your camera to the right and your character may just go whoosh really fast. That is called analog drifting. Depending on the sensitivity that you have set in the game may differ, so you may not see analog drifting that fast. If you're on, like, say for Call of Duty and you're on the sensitivity on medium 4, then you'll notice it much more faster because it acts abnormally. But you first see it when you're not touching the analog controller and your character starts moving either moving or turning in an action that you have not even did. You may think that, oh, the controller may be upside down and it's probably moving the controller, but that is not the case here. Analog drifting can make a controller very, very frustrating to use, especially if you're playing a first-person shooter and trying to get up the ranks and trying to become the best and professional as possible. Even if you're a casual player, this can happen to anybody. And I have a controller that it's not like this one. This one's actually customized. It has a white back and it has a black. The black I actually replaced with a white one because I actually ordered a transparent casing and it didn't fit this controller, so I made modifications to this so it could fit on this controller, and I couldn't put the top on because then I would have to make modifications, and that was just being worth it. But you get the idea. But that controller I actually recently repaired for the vibration motors and the rumble motors, and I'm actually happy with it. But the other controller that it is all black, and that one is very suffering from analog drift, and it's terrible. And I'm gonna explain to you how I figured out that other controller had analog drift. One day I was going to be editing a video, and I was editing a video because I don't know what video it was, and what's happening was that while I was editing the what do we call it? The clip was moving on its own, like if it was scrolling through the film on its own, and I wasn't even pressing the analog sticks. That's how I know that what analog drifting is. So if you're a parent and you have a child come up to you saying that, hey, I have my controller is moving on its own without me touching it, it is analog drifting. Can you fix it on your own? Of course. You would have to get a solder. You would get soldering wire. You would have to get flux, and you would have to have the patience, because analog sticks, they may seem simple, but taking them away and putting new ones can be very frustrating. And that is the horriblest part about soldering, is that you can be very nerve-wracking. If you're very unsure if you can repair it, just go buy a new controller, and don't buy a controller from used, buy it brand new. You can also purchase it from the actual manufacturer itself. So if you're unsure whether if GameStop, Walmart are selling actual either used or brand new controllers, you can buy directly from the manufacturer, which is either PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, etc., etc. That's your best bet. Is there anything that you can do to prevent this? Well, taking care of your controller is one of the best things you can do to prevent analog drifting. Analog drifting can happen over time, even with good care, but if you even care of it very well, then you're most likely not going to suffer that. For me, I think that personally, I've thrown my controller out of rage a couple of times over the last year, this year. And I think that the analog drifting was never existing in that controller, but it started happening. And I think because it was a human error, it was my error. It wasn't the controller's fault. I think it was after it took so much damage, it just started breaking, and that's my fault. But as long as you take care of your controller, you should be fine. Can you do anything to fix those terminals that is happening? And if you guys don't know, this issue has to deal with the connections within the analog stick itself, and they can be replaced if you have spare parts, but it's not worth it simply because you have to rip open on the side, and it's not really worth it. So I would recommend you to just either buy a new controller, and if you're very confident enough to buy a new analog sticks, and buy good ones, don't buy the very cheap ones, you should be fine, and you should be able to do it if you're confident enough, if you know what you're doing. Because if you screw up on the board, not only that you could screw up the analog sticks, but you can also damage your controller's motherboard, which will make the whole controller basically useless to use, and your money is basically wasted. But that's analog drifting, that's analog drifting, and I'm hoping that a lot of people can understand and see what analog drifting, on how bad it can happen to some people, because I've had controllers that I owned like what, 6 or 5 controllers due to analog drifting, and it is very terrible. I don't know if it was the manufacturer's problem issues, but seriously, it is terrible to happen, especially if that's the only controller you have. That's even worse. So, is analog drifting going to prevent you from, you know, is it going to prevent you from, playing a game? No, it's not going to prevent you playing a game, but it'll be much more frustrating because, say, if you're shooting at somebody and you're not touching the analog sticks, you may be very inaccurate, which can be very frustrating. There's some games, it doesn't affect some games with drifting, but it affects others that involve you moving your camera as much. But beyond that, it's a very, very annoying problem. And if you encounter this issue, either if you find it confident to repair it yourself, then do it out of confidence. But make sure that if you need help, look online. Don't try to be a big guy and say, "Oh no, I know what I'm doing," because even if we know what we're doing, we all make mistakes, and that's the big problem here. But either way, you get that, or you could buy a new controller, which I would recommend you buying a new controller anyways. It's probably time to do, because once one problem happens with the controller, then you're going to have things follow it along the road. So this controller is actually very old, to be honest. It's pretty old. I think I had this with not my original controller. This is like my 5th controller, but I've been repairing this controller. Like, I already repaired the rumbles. I replaced the battery, I think years ago. I replaced the casing because the old casing was bad. What else? I had to replace the rubber pads that presses on the buttons, because they start breaking. But as I said, over time, controllers are not made to last, so they're gonna break, and that's gonna happen. It depends on how much you use the controller, but as long as you take care of your controller and you keep it clean, you take care of it like if it was your baby, then you'd be fine. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope you guys did find this information about analog drifting very useful. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Bye.